Hey everyone, Rin here, and thank you for coming. And tonight, we're going to be taking a deeper look at a film that I've been stoked about for well over a year now. Releasing as the 26th movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, this film comes on the helm of a successful year of several Disney Plus series rollouts, as well as the middle-of-the-road reviews for Black Widow, and the very much so positive ones for Shang-Chi. Directed by Chloe Zhao, the reigning and defending Oscar-deemed Best Director for her work in Nomadland, this body of work takes on the challenge of opening up the cosmos in the greater Marvel universe to both the casual and devout fans of the MCU, deepening its mythology even further. Here are my thoughts on Marvel's latest ensemble affair, Eternals. Welcome back everyone, and as always, I can barely contain my excitement for the opportunity to discuss yet another MCU masterpiece. Coming into this film, I honestly had no idea how exactly Chloe Zhao would rein in a good, concise story and plot for such an enduring, comic-entrenched group of superheroes with vastly different personalities, stories, and history. One could look to James Gunn's successful handling of the Guardians of the Galaxy and possibly say, hey, at least we know it's possible. But in that instance, they wouldn't be entirely correct, as the introduction of the Guardians of the Galaxy and the Eternals, in my opinion, offer very different challenges. The first Guardians film introduced us to the main core we've come to know and love, and although they do trek throughout the galaxy, their story remains somewhat contained in a manner in its handprint in the larger scheme of things, as the characters haven't lived for a millennia, as well as the film catering more to a very upbeat and lighthearted experience. Eternals, on the other hand, literally begins with the retelling of the creation of the universe, attributing it to the powerful cosmic beings we've come to know as the Celestials. I mean, this movie really does begin with an opening scroll that explains that before the six singularities and dawn of creation came the Celestials, and from them came Arishem, the prime Celestial who created the first sun and brought light into the universe. And as all things were in balance, of course something had to eventually disrupt that. Cue the Deviants from deep space, who arrived and began feasting on the intelligent life the Celestials were fostering. As a countermeasure, Arishem sends the Eternals, who are immortal heroes hailing from the planet Olympia, to eliminate the Deviants. It is here that our story picks up, with the Eternals arriving on Earth around 5000 BC and saving early civilization from being ravaged by the Deviants. We get to witness the extent of their early influence, as they are responsible from the background for the slow progression of human society, from things such as the plow, steam engine, weapons, irrigation systems, and much more. They end up staying together until about 1521 AD, when Athena contracts Madwiri, an incurable eternal disease that makes her a danger to everyone, as she is no longer in control of her mind and loses her space and time in her extremely long-lived life. So they split, awaiting further instructions from Arishem, as they are to stay and protect the planet. The heroes go their own ways, all living their lives throughout the ages in different manners and locations, and as instructed by Ajak, trying to find their individual purposes. I must say quickly, I really enjoyed this aspect of the film, as the lives they all go on to live provide tons of insight into these characters and their base desires, a bit I wish we got even more of. Gilgamesh takes Athena off to take care of her in isolation away from anyone she can harm. Cersei and Icarus live out their love for a time. Kingo and Sprite hang around one another for a while until Kingo abandons her. Makari never leaves the ship. Druig decides to take a group of humans and live off the grid, making it such that they live in complete peace without conflict, which is a cool tie-in to history, as it explains the disappearance of the Aztec people. And Festos eventually starts a family that restores his faith in humanity, having realized prior the devastating evils humans used his creations for that he'd given to them, such as the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. I personally love Kingo's entire setup, living it up big time in Bollywood, creating an entire fake family that he is actually every single person in, to explain why he never ever ages. Going one step further, past this movie having a very capable and gifted director, it also boasts one of the best ensemble casts in the MCU to date, and possibly assembled in any film this year in 2021, with only the likes of Denis Villeneuve's Doom potentially being able to stand up to it. Leading our group of immortal heroes, we first have Salma Hayek as Ajax, the wise leader with the ability to heal, who has a direct communication line to Arishem. There's then Gemma Chan as Cersei, the empath of the group with the ability to manipulate inanimate matter through physical contact. And as I'm sure you know, this isn't Gemma Chan's first appearance in the MCU, as she was also in Captain Marvel as the Kree Starforce sniper Minerva. Along with Cersei, we get Kit Harington's Dane Whitman as a non-Eternal, but instead as her co-worker at the museum she works at in London in present day. He also happens to be her current love interest. Richard Madden appears as Icarus, the most powerful of the group, with the ability to fly and shoot cosmic energy beams from his eyes. Don Lee portrays Gilgamesh, who is physically the strongest of the group, who has the gift of superhuman strength as well as manipulation of cosmic energy, which usually results in him punching stuff really hard with his glowing fists. Barry Keoghan portrays Druid with the ability to manipulate the minds and choices of others. Leah McHugh is Sprite with the ability to project supreme lifelike illusions. And Lauren Ridloff is Makari, possessing the power of super speed. And we're not done yet, as we also see Brian Tyree Henry here as Festos, the group's hyper-intelligent technological inventor and weapons specialist. Kumail Nanjiani is Kingo with the power to project cosmic energy projectiles from his hands. And last but certainly not least, we even got Angelina Jolie as Stina, no A, who is considered to be one of the fiercest warriors in the universe with the ability to form any weapon out of cosmic energy. Now, with the stage set and all the necessary players identified, let me get right to it. I really enjoyed this movie. In the short time since its release in international markets and to critics at large, the film has quickly become Marvel's worst reviewed movie ever on Rotten Tomatoes. Alternatively, it has a relatively high audience rating at around 85% last time I checked. I knew this going into the film, and as always, I in no way allowed this to influence how I viewed the movie and the experience that came with it. The beautiful thing about movies and fandom is that we all like different things and have our very own unique specific preferences. So while others believe the movie to be too stuffed and convoluted, I saw a movie brimming with heart, intention, possibilities, and the long-awaited maturation of the MCU into something much bigger than what it already was. The plot of this movie isn't anything overly complicated and lends decently, in my opinion, to the very deep mythology that had to also be relayed to its viewers. I never felt overwhelmed with information for that matter, and I felt sufficiently informed enough as the movie progressed in understanding what all was going on. Everyone performed beautifully, and there weren't any rough patches in the film that jerked me out of the experience that I can recall. I will say that I wish we got more of Kit Harington's Dane Whitman, but considering the scale of the threats the Eternals were facing, I think it was best decided for Dane and the Black Knight to sit this one out, but more on that later. Overall, the movie excelled, I believe, in all of the areas that a typical MCU movie does, delivering on the fantastical aspect of a superhero film with a good blend of action, heart, humor, and purpose. I also believe that it took a bold new step in a direction we haven't seen many MCU movies take, that being almost bordering on being an art house special. The cinematography in this movie was very pleasing, and the flashback scenes littered throughout time of the Eternals in different eras offered up ideal chances to really capitalize on executing the various cultures and aesthetics throughout history. The various narrative twists throughout the movie, such as Icarus eventually turning on Ajax, and the true story behind the origins and purposes of both the Deviants and Eternals, weren't too overly telegraphed. And when the moments hit where the reveals took place, it came off as justifiably shocking. The various Avengers references were well timed and generated the desired reactions reactions from the audience I was in. I will say I was shocked, as in the comics, it was actually Druig who turned on the group. So when it ended up being Richard Madden's Icarus, I was of course taken aback. The short of it ends up being, instead of the Deviants coming from deep space to disrupt the Celestials' plans, and the Eternals coming from the planet Olympia to eradicate them, Arishem actually created both of them at the World Forge. The Deviants were intended to be simple tools of culling intelligent life on the planets that were created to eventually birth Celestials. But the Deviants revolted, and as a result, the Eternals were created to deal with them. This all ends up becoming a major issue for the Eternals, as they found out that Earth is home to and the future birthplace of the Celestial Tiamat. And when the emergence takes place, the Earth and all of its people will be destroyed. Ajax has known the truth all along and has been cognizant for thousands of years of the different planets the Eternals have ventured to in order to protect and herd the native intelligent life, such to feed the growing Celestials inside those planets. But because of the resiliency and love and natural order of humans, exemplified by Thanos snapping away half of all life in the galaxy and the Avengers from Earth bringing them back, Earth makes a mark on her that she can't overlook. This new aversion to the plan put in place by Arishem is what leads to Icarus killing her and the mantle falling to Cersei of communicating with Arishem and leading the Eternals going forward. Now, what I will say I didn't like about the film was the handling of the Deviants. We know all too well that sometimes MCU movies can have a tendency of rushing and underdeveloping the villains of their blockbuster films, and unfortunately Eternals doesn't quite break that curse. The Deviants, while awesome to look at and great in character design, fall completely flat in my opinion in this movie. I really thought we were going to get to see the Deviants fully fleshed out, such that once the big battle between them and the Eternals took place, it would actually be appealing, but that was not at all the case. In a way, Icarus actually ends up being the main villain of the film, and the Deviants more so his lackeys that simply draw some of the firepower away from him in the final battle. I know that it was intended to be Crow from the comics, but honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if others didn't even recognize that and just decided to identify him as the main deviant that kills Ajax and Gilgamesh and absorbs their power. He does eventually gain a level of sentience and the ability to shapeshift and play mind games, but even then it just isn't used to its full capability. That in and of itself speaks to the lack of attention these characters were given. I hoped we would maybe even bridge over into the discussion of Thanos' backstory a bit more, as in the comics he is an Eternal but suffers from the Deviant Syndrome, meaning he looks like them and has some of their heightened abilities. The ending of the movie for me was fitting, given all of the various aspects that had to be brought to satisfactory closes. Thena finally killing Crow somehow allows for her to finally realize who she is, which was cool. I like Kingo's choice to just not fight in the final battle, as he actually agreed with Icarus but didn't want to fight his family. I did find myself feeling bad for Sprite, as she just felt so left out living out her immortal life as a child, so the choice for her to become human to fully live out her life also seemed very fitting. Druig, Makkari, and Thena leaving to find other Eternals and tell them the truth as well does bode well for us, as I imagine that will play a huge part in the sequel. Icarus literally ends himself, it would seem, flying off into the sun, which I believe may not be as it seems, cause I could definitely see him returning at some point later if he is needed, if there is in fact a major conflict between the Eternals and the Celestials. And even if he did fly into the sun and kill himself, Arishem could simply bring him back at the World Forge. And for Dane and Cersei, I really am looking forward to the dynamics of their relationship going forward, given her being an Eternal and him being the eventual wielder of the Ebony blade, hence making him the Black Knight. Nothing prepared me for the film's ending though, as I was completely aghast when Cersei is sucked into space along with the other earthbound Eternals by Arishem, who has come to find out why Tiamat was sacrificed. He states that he will use their memories to determine if the humans are worthy of such a sacrifice, and he will then pass judgment, which we all know promises all kinds of entertaining and menacing chaos in the future to come. Quickly diving over to the comics, as always, there are of course Easter eggs and references for us to bring attention to. The Celestial Tiamat, who is to be born from the earth, is actually known in the comics as the Dreamer, which is a cool tie-in considering the big solution to save the day ends up being putting him to sleep initially. It is also worth noting that in this film we had somewhat of an untrustworthy narrator, as most of the opening scroll ends up being a complete lie, as we later find out the truth about the Eternals and the Deviants, which is funny considering this is the first opening scroll we've ever gotten in the MCU. The Unimind that we see used at the end of the movie by Cersei to turn Tiamat to stone is also from the comics, from when the Eternals first discovered they could join their will and intelligence into a powerful entity. Also, in the comics, the Eternals weren't robots as they're represented here, but instead were just highly evolved humans who were modified by the Celestials. And did everyone else geek out as well when we finally see Kit Harington's Dane Whitman and Richard Madden's Icarus come face to face for a bit of a Game of Thrones reunion? Interestingly enough, the last thing Robb Stark says to Jon Snow is that the next time he sees him, he'll be dressed in black, as Jon Snow was going off to join the Watch and become a man in black. Funny enough, that holds true here, as Dane Whitman is in fact the Black Knight in the MCU. There are 2 post-credit scenes for Eternals, and I would hope at this point, 26 movies in, you knew to stay behind in the theaters after the credits begin to roll to see them with the rest of us. The first post-credit scene picks up right after our insane ending with Dane Whitman in what could be his uncle Nathan Garrett's castle from the comics, which he eventually ends up inheriting en route to taking up the Ebony Blade. We know this is most likely the case, as earlier in the film, Cersei did mention to him that it might be time for him to bury the hatchet with his uncle when it looked like the world might end. We see Dane approach a box with medieval markings, with the words "Death is my reward" on it. He opens said box and we see what we can only believe now to be the Ebony Blade, as it seems to react to him as he begins to move his hands towards it. In the comics, Whitman is unaware that his uncle had been villainous and upholds a promise to him on his deathbed to restore honor to the family name in a way that he could not. The Black Knight goes on to eventually join the Masters of Evil, but only under the guise of infiltrating them to help the Avengers, who he eventually helps further in their fight against Kang the Conqueror. In the comics, we even see Dane and Cersei travel back in time to meet one of his ancestors, which leads me to believe we're not far off from seeing that maybe take place in the MCU. With an actor of the caliber of Kit Harington, it will be very interesting to see the story of Dane Whitman played out on screen, as the wielder of the Ebony Blade over time changes internally and can become very violent and unpredictable, and that struggle will be front and center for us to see. And to add just an extra treat on top, it looks like Dane Whitman's attention is drawn away from the Ebony Blade by a voice we don't seem to know anything about yet. Could it have been the Watcher? It did in fact sound like Jeffrey Wright. The second post-credit scene had my entire theater stumped at first, and then yelling with joy, which of course is a great thing. We see the cosmos-bound Eternals back on their ship, now concerned about the ones they left on Earth now being out of contact and having disappeared, which they sum up to be the work of Arishem. Before much else can be said, we get the introduction of 2 brand new characters to the MCU, those being Pip the Troll, who hilariously teleports onto the ship drunk and lands on his face, and he introduces them to none other than the Royal Prince of Titan, Starfox himself, played by Harry Styles. Starfox is also a prime Eternal here, just like Ajak, and just so happens to be the half-brother of Thanos. In the comics, Pip the Troll was introduced by Jim Starlin back in 1975, hailing from the planet Laxadasia, where he was once Prince Gafern. During a bout of drunkenness, he was accidentally mutated by drinking a mutagenic hallucinogenic ale. As a result of his degenerate transformation and continuous hedonistic behavior, his people stripped him of his office and rank, and he stowed away off planet. We eventually see him joining forces with various different heroes and personalities throughout the comics, those including Adam Warlock, who we now know will be portrayed by Will Poulter in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Starfox is in fact the half-brother of Thanos and also goes by Eros. In the comics, he eventually ends up on Earth after battling his older brother Thanos, even joining the Avengers. He has the power to induce pleasure in people. This is in fact a very cool moment, as we now have a chance of possibly seeing a relationship between Thanos and his brother played out on the big screen. That is, if the multiverse is still in play and another version of Thanos wanders up. It is mentioned that Starfox hails from the Mystery Planet, which also ties into another statement made by Pip in his introduction, as he states he also defeated Black Roger, which is most likely a reference to Dark Roger in the comics, who was the monarch of the Mystery Planet. I love the interaction here, as we see that Starfox shows up just in the nick of time, as he is aware of the current situation and knows that Cersei and the others are in trouble, and how to help them and where to find them. This of course sets up the next film even more, promising the chances to possibly see both Pip's and Starfox's stories feathered out a bit more. This could also be teeing up an all-out war between both the Eternals and the Celestials, which will be absolutely insane to witness and might even lead to the introduction finally of Galactus, if he is in fact sent to consume the Earth. In closing, I would highly recommend this movie to you and whoever you like enough to have sit next to you for 3 hours that you can trust won't talk throughout the entire thing. This was a huge undertaking for Chloe Zhao, and I think she did an awesome job given the scope and mythology of the character she was tasked with bringing to life. I for one am in complete aversion to the Rotten Tomatoes score, as this movie is much better than some of the older MCU films, to name just a few, such as Thor, Iron Man 2, Captain Marvel, and possibly even Black Widow. I think it goes without saying that we will definitely be getting a sequel to this movie, as well as eventually seeing them in other MCU properties here soon. So we won't have to wait long to get more of this diverse bunch of immortals. I will of course be continuing to cover all live action Marvel and Star Wars Disney Plus content, and films from all walks of life that I have the pleasure of watching. And if you feel so inclined, I would love to have you back here week in and week out to continue to cover it all with us. Again guys, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and click that bell for notifications if you've enjoyed our content here tonight. Jump down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. And while you're at it, be sure to check out some of the other content here on the channel. All of the necessary links are listed here below for you to keep up with the coming content and shareables. Please be sure to follow me on all social media platforms, or just the one you use most frequently. We are slowly but surely building a community here, and I would personally love for you to be a part of that. And last but not least, we have a merch store. So whether you see something you like or just simply want to support the channel, head on over to our shop and grab something, or grab everything. But again, thank you so much guys and gals for visiting here with us today. I really appreciate each and every viewing minute of your time you've given us. There's loads of content we'll be sending your way, so I'll be seeing you. But for now, be blessed. And it was written.
Across the nighttime, the city sleep inside. Yeah, hear her voice shake my window, sweet seduce inside. Yeah, send me out into the nighttime, for walls won't hold me tonight.